Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the November 14th Williamsburg City Council meeting. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Ramsey?
Here.
Mayor Pons?
Here.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Here.
Ms. Kernshire? Here.
Thank you. In our packets, we have the minutes for the October work session, the GIO retreat, and the closed session. I'd like to make a motion to approve if there's no amendments.
So I move to approve the minutes from October 7th, October 14th, and November 7th, 2024.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernshire? Aye.
Okay, there are no matters of special privilege, which leads to public hearings, and the first and only is the consideration and action regarding PCR 24-022, a special use permit to convert vacant retail space in Building 1 of Midtown Row, located at 221 Monticello Avenue, to 5 apartments. Ms. Griffin, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pons, and good afternoon to you and to all members of the City Council. We have received a request for a special use permit to convert 8,467 square feet of retail space to 5 residential apartments in Building 1 of Midtown Row. The 5 apartments would consist of 2 4-bedrooms and 3 3-bedrooms for a total of 17 bedrooms on the first floor. The owners of Midtown Row, which was Broad Street Realty Midtown Center LLC, has hired AES Consulting as the applicant. The property is located in the B3 district. This is our urban business zoning district. A multifamily development here is required to receive a special use permit, so that's why we're before you today. It is evident that multifamily dwellings are allowed at Midtown Row. There are currently 240 apartments in the Midtown Row development. There are 64 apartments specifically in Building 1, and the applicant is requesting that there will be added 5 apartments to the first floor of Building 1. And so the real question is not really whether apartments are allowed in the B3 district. That's precedent's been set with this particular Midtown Row development. It's really, the two questions are, does increasing the number of apartments in Building 1 exceed the requirement that mixed-use buildings can only have 80% of the gross floor area to be dedicated to retail space? And then the other question is, do these 5 apartments meet the criteria for the special use permit that we've gone over several times, and I'll go before you and talk to you about later on in the presentation. So just to orient you, the Building 1 is shown at the top of the screen here. It is closest to the College of William and Mary's Education Center. You also have Building 2. Now, see if I can use yes. Building 1 is here, Building 2, Building 4, and here's Building 3. Back here you have Building 9, and then here is Building 7, which is where the Marshalls is. So before we get into really the components of what they're requesting, I did want to go over what was allowed in the 2017 special use permit approval. I think it's important to talk about that. First, it allowed for increase in the percentage of gross floor area of any new building on any lot. The B3 by right allows 67%. That just means if you have a mixed-use building, no more than 67% of the gross floor area can be residential. With the approval in 2017 of Midtown Row, it increased that to 80%. That also looked at increased or allow redevelopment projects to reduce the yard and transitional screening as a part of Midtown Row. It increased the height of buildings from 45 feet from grade to 66 feet from grade. And looking at the PCR 17-019, which was what was approved back in 2017, there was no relationship between the approval of the height improvements with commercial. It was simply stated in the staff report and looking back that it was to accommodate 5 stories. So there was no relationship to increasing the 66% based on the commercial being allowed on the first floor. They also allowed up to 4 unrelated individuals in a student design dwelling. So as you know, the requirements in our zoning ordinance is only 3 unrelated individuals in a home. This allowed up to 4 in Midtown Row because this was specifically for students. The other amendment for the text was an amendment to add the word design to the definition of student dwellings in the B3 district. And this just gave staff more opportunity to review applications. So this gives you a rendering of what, if approved, what the apartments would look like from the first floor exterior. The entire gross floor area of the building is 120,311, and then the amenity space is 15,093. Building 1 has all of the amenity spaces for Midtown Road. There is a library, a movie theater, a gaming room, and other amenities there, and that's a total of 15,000 square feet. And then the 64 residential units make roughly around 67,000 square feet, and the retail space is 8,467. And during that conversion, what you see is that increases the residential gross floor area to 76,427, or 63.5%. And this is important because it does not go over the 80% that is required. So again, that was one of the questions that staff felt was the most important first to answer. So first, we know that this does meet the zoning requirements of not going over 80%. This gives you a look at how the retail space on the bottom currently looks. The applicant has gone before the Architectural Review Board, and they have approved the picture that you saw here. What happened is that they actually took away some storefronts that were here. And when I say storefronts, I simply mean the floor to ceiling or ceiling to floor windows here. They've added glazing with transoms, and there will be no openings on the outside where, if these apartments were allowed, people would not be able to access the apartments from the Monticello Avenue. It would be a small corridor on the side. Any doors here would be only for emergency access. One of the questions that the ARB had was about whether people would be able to see inside the building. The ARB did not approve the request as submitted by BSR, and what that request was for the filming on the bottom of the apartments to actually be a gray film that would not allow you to be able to see inside. The ARB instead chose to allow the filming that's the same, or the applique that is the same on the commercial, and so you would be able to see inside, but they have requested that they have the blinds that you have on the 2nd through the 5th floors. So the white blinds that you see here are also shown on the 1st floor, and that's how that would look if approved. Other ideas that we've had is landscaping there, and we don't feel that there's enough space for landscaping. Other ideas that we could look into or explore is some type of applique or artistry applique on the 1st floor windows, or we can also have some type of outside table seating is what's actually allowed here, and there could be activation of the street through some outdoor seating with some type of screening, so you would not be able to see into the apartments. This simply gives you the floor plan, and you do see here that there would be some bedrooms and bathrooms on the Monticello side. So we get to the 6 criteria for special use permits. We do know that this particular area is in harmony with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan that was used in 2017 was a 2013 comprehensive plan. However, looking at the 2021 comprehensive plan, this development is still in keeping. The multifamily uses are still in keeping with the comprehensive plan. Also, we believe it's in harmony with the zoning ordinance. I just showed you where the additional apartments will not go over the 80% that is required, not allowed for residential apartments. And then we get to, is it in harmony with the character of adjacent properties and the surrounding neighborhoods? And I'm going to speak to that a little bit later. I wanted to first talk about adequately serviced by essential public services, such as streets, drainage facilities, and fire protection. I also wanted to talk about the destruction or loss of damage or any feature determined to be of significant ecological, scenic, or historical importance. We do know, as everyone can see, Midtown Road was there. The additional apartments will not cause any loss or damage to scenic or historical or ecological importance. Looking at the design and siting and landscaping, I feel like I've covered that with telling you about what the ARB has approved. They are not, the only thing that will change is that they are going to provide a small corridor and a sidewalk on the corner to allow those that are living in the apartments to be able to access that, and that is not a minor increase, and the Planning Commission will review that at their next meeting. So, in regards to trip generation, Kimley Horn conducted the trip generation, and what we found is that there is a decrease in overall trips if the retail is taken off and if the apartments are added. Specifically for Building 1, 549 daily trips are cited if the building remains to have retail, and that is retail if there was not a vacancy in the building. And with the removal of the retail, there would be 251 daily trips with the addition of the apartments. In regards to parking spaces, in Building 1, 133 parking spaces are required, and with the removal of the retail, 117 parking spaces would be required. If you look at through Buildings 1 through 4, there are 590 spaces required for parking. And the overall development for Buildings 1 through 4 actually provides 754 parking spaces. So in regards to trip generation, there's a reduction. In regards to parking, there is a reduction. And the development has ample parking for the apartments if they were added to this particular development. Another question that was on our minds is water and sewer flows. And so what we see here is there's a reduction in both gallons per day and gallons per minute. The average flow, if the apartments were not here, and if it was just the residential that's currently here, the 64 apartments, and then the proposed retail, it's 16.13 gallons per minute. With the residential, the added residential of 5 apartments, it goes down to 14.85 gallons per minute. The peak flow gallons per day with the retail is 54,680. And then it's a reduction to 53,475. And then for peak flow gallons per minute, it goes from 41.50 to 37.17. These figures have been verified by our city engineer. So in regards to the comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinance, and also whether the development would be adequately serviced by public services and there's no loss of any features, and it'll also be designed, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the character of the adjacent properties in the neighborhood. Prior to the Planning Commission meeting, and right at the Planning Commission meeting, staff actually recommended denial of this request, and that was based on the information that was provided at the time. After the Planning Commission meeting, staff had the opportunity to talk more with the applicant, and some of the questions that I had and that staff had regarding whether the leases they were actively leasing the spaces and whether apartments could not be put someplace else besides on Monticello Avenue were actually answered. So here you see Building 3. Building 3 is the building that is closest to the Riverside Health Services building in the back, where you have the entertainment area. And here you see that Super Chicks is here now. There's a Salon 7, and there's a LOI out for a luxury nail salon. They're at least for the med spa, and then they're in discussions for a salad restaurant and also for educational administrative offices. And so the first thought of staff was whether they could have apartments here instead of off of Monticello Avenue. And in speaking with them, what we learned is that this area was specifically for entertainment, specifically for having people to come to this particular area for outdoor activities. And also, when leasing these spaces, residential wasn't desired to be interspersed among retail. And it was also later that we found and received this schematic here that shows you other leases that are actively taking place and moving forward in Buildings 2 and Buildings 4. and also behind the marshals. And so I won't go over all of them, but again, one of the questions was from the staff was whether Building 1 off of Monticello Avenue had to be used for residential. And so with this, what we came away with is that there was active marketing for the space and that there was not any prospects. The other interesting thing that we learned was that in October of 2018, there was a request of an amendment from BSR Realty before the Planning Commission and City Council. And at that time, there was a request to add 5 units to Building 1. We don't see in our notes why it was withdrawn. Several parts of that amendment went forward, but they did remove that request. And so from 2018 to the present, they have been trying to actively market this space. And what they are coming back with is that the parking here is not sufficient for retail space. And so they wanted now to request that this be used for apartments. So staff does recommend approval of PCR 24022, and to prohibit, one of the conditions would be to prohibit apartments on the first floor, Building 1, from having any applications, pinning, or hanging of any items on the exterior or interior of the windows. And this is actually for the occupants. So occupants would not be able to handle or hang Christmas lights or anything like that on the outside. The owner is agreeable to this, and he is willing to put this as a condition, and he said that it will be included in the lease agreements of the 5 apartments on the first floor. Now, during the Planning Commission meeting, it was an interesting way of going about it, but the chairman asked at that time if there was a motion to recommend approval of PCR 24022. There was not a motion and not a second on that. There was then a motion to recommend denial, and this motion was seconded, but the vote was actually 2 to approve denial, 3 to deny denial, and then 1 that abstained. And in speaking with our legal counsel, this was actually an approval of PCR 24022. And I know that was long, it's very detailed, so if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin, and that was long and detailed, but I appreciate all the background information. And I appreciate the analysis that you all did along with the engineer to look at trip generation, parking requirements, and then even going as far as some of the utility usage, specifically water, and so it's interesting in a way, but not unexpected, that each of these things had declined.
Yes.
For retail, you would need a whole lot more parking space, I think. The requirements are greater, at the very least.
Correct.
Trip generation obviously would be less than if it was a dentist office or a law practice. And then certainly with, water consumption, I can see how that would be less as well. So those are all positive things. I do want to ask you about the ARB's recommendation or their denial to put any type of film on the windows so that people couldn't see in, and what was the rationale for that?
So a film will be placed on the windows, but it's the same as on the commercial windows. And they felt like they wanted the commercial first floor to still look commercial, and so they wanted to keep the same film that is on the commercial uses that are presently there.
That's all the question that's I had, Mr. Vice
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar question about, I visited the site yesterday with Councilwoman Ramsey, and I'll just be straightforward. I don't like the approach of film and blinds because I think it's going to be difficult to monitor whether it's in the lease or not that somebody's going to have the blinds up or down. I don't like the idea that you can navigate down that sidewalk, just anybody passing by, and possibly be able to see into one of the units, especially now that you pointed out there's bathrooms, and you would hope they wouldn't have blinds open, but I think that's going to be hard to monitor. So I would like to see something different for the exterior, because you're not talking about a residential size window, you're talking about a commercial window, commercial windows along that whole side that are much larger than a residential window. And then this may be a question for the applicant. It seems, I know that, and I appreciate all the work for the parking, but it seems like that parking may be an issue now with the current setup. If they're starting to designate if I'm correct, they're starting to designate some parking spaces across Monticello Avenue for Midtown Row. So that concerns me that there's going to be more cars in that parking lot across the street than actually in Midtown Road. I know you gave a number there. I'm just wondering how that's playing out. If they underestimated the number of cars for the number of units.
I will say, and I would get them to answer it more fully, I do know that they changed their parking arrangements where they had more parking spaces for retail along College Row. So that did change some things around, and I would ask them specifically, but I know that I did see that come through the office last year, and so some things changed as far as the parking was concerned, but it was more to free up parking for the retail along College Row.
Mr. Chair, any questions before the public hearing?
I do. I just have, it's, like I do sometimes, a bit of a clarification, make sure I got my head straight here. I understand that the building 1 is currently all apartments, but the amenity spaces are all contained in that building.
That's
So like
correct.
you said, the library and other common space. So with adding the 5 apartments, you say that still would keep the residential below the 80% allowable for the building. right?
Correct.
So there's still no commercial. So the balance of the space is all the amenity space. Is that right?
That's correct. There would be, if approved, there's no commercial in Building 1, only amenities and apartments.
Okay. I think that's the only question I had. Thank you.
So I don't really have any questions based on, conversations and site visit, but just to clarify, so to date, there has not been any commercial ever in Building 1.
That is correct.
So it has only been apartments and the amenity space since the building was open because they've never been able to lease that space.
Correct.
And just what Vice Mayor Dent was talking about as far as being able to walk past, I was thinking that the film that they were going to apply wouldn't allow complete viewing, but it would sort of be a shadow with some sort of shading, I guess.
That is correct. It's just not as much as the residential. But what you're saying is correct. There would be some shadowing, but you would be able to see in if you really wanted to.
If you stood at the window and sort of
Yes.
peered in.
Yes,
But there would be opportunities, like you mentioned, of perhaps going back to the ARB with a different type of application to make it a little bit more privacy and also to provide a little design to those windows.
That's a possibility, and I think that has to be something that the city council puts in the condition, because otherwise it's nothing that the staff would be able to have them do if it's approved.
Okay.
I don't have any questions for you, Director Griffin. I may have some for the applicant.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Ms. Griffin. With that, we'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that'd like to speak on it. Perhaps the applicant would like to come. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Am I allowed to hand these out?
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. You did probably better than I will, but, I think our challenge and our point
No,
in
I'm
our
sorry,
reason.
just state your name for the record.
Sean Mays, I'm the asset manager for Broad Street Realty. I am the project supervisor
Thank you.
overseeing this. By the way, Mike Jacoby is stuck in traffic and apologizes that he's on I-95 right now above Richmond, so he would much
Time to
rather
turn
give his
around.
presentation, so. That said, I think the biggest challenge for us in trying to lease this space for retail, it's taken us 5 years, right? And we've really given it our all. We feel that residential, converting this space into residential is the highest and best use at this moment. Given that it's been such a challenge to lease to residential tenant or retail tenants, but we have a backlog of residential tenants, students that, on the residential side that this can address. We've got some great strengths with the location of the building. Apartments are building 1, which is where we house all of our amenities. We've got our leasing office, the gym, the library, a gaming room, a lot of the mailboxes. So it is in the flow of traffic, residential traffic, for all of the residents of the buildings. This is where they go to congregate, they pay their bills, they pick up their mail, they work out. Unfortunately, this 8,000 square feet on the side has been a little bit of a desert for retailers. And the challenge with the retailers is that it sits back a little bit further from the roadway than the other buildings. Apologies. There's a lack of parking adjacent to the premises. Again, we've accommodated, as Ms. Griffin alluded to, we've created more parking on College to address the parking near the retailers. That said, we have made residential parking across the street. There's a big demand. We're getting paid for those parking spaces as well. So we felt, we could maximize the value of the parking spaces, and we created 20 spaces across the street. If at all, and at any time in the future, we need more spaces, we can actually take those back. So we have some flexibility there. The physical topology, there's several grade changes from building 4, building 2 to building 1. It's downhill, right? So part of the building is higher than the other, and we've had some challenges with retailers getting comfortable with that. Overall, there's a lack of interest from the retailers and other types of commercial businesses. We've reached out to banks as well as insurance companies, different types of uses to try and backfill this space, to no success. And then right now, there's an oversupply of retail space in the overall Williamsburg submarket, and much less expensive office space options throughout the market. Some of the costs that we've incurred just in the last, year and a half, we've incurred almost $1.3 million between salaries on the retail side, marketing the space, trying to get attention from retailers that would be interested. We've had third-party consultants, much like 510 Architects that we have here with us today, doing different layouts and schematics for different prospective tenants for the space. We've spent almost $85,000 on events, bringing the fall festival, inviting brokers in the community, economic development, trying to generate interest on the building 1 space. I can go through the leasing and marketing strategies deployed. We've got 15 listed here, but I think it's a pretty exhaustive list of what we've tried to do to get retailers interested in this space. The highest and best use is really going to be residential. You know, we have a wait list of 360 residents right now that we're filling for academic year 25-26. So again, this all contributes to kind of what's the highest and best use. It's clearly residential.
Thank you. I think Mr. Rogers may have had a question for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mays and Ms. Warner and the Midtown team for coming to speak in front of us. Appreciate the packet as well. Part for me, part for the public too. I hear you when you say best case use is residential. I'm curious about the efforts over the 5 years you mentioned to try to lease the space as retail.
Sure.
All we've heard is how much well-liked Midtown is residentially, and I know residents have yet seen some commercial space still vacant. So could you walk us through a little bit, just the efforts to lease for the retail space so that we know why ultimately the decision was made for residential?
Yeah, if I could direct you to slide 6, you know, we've got our leasing and marketing strategies deployed. Now, we've got 3 to 4 personnel dedicated to just the leasing of Midtown Row. We've got Ms. Warner, who is on site to address any people that may show up with interest. We've marketed the premises at a significant discount to what other spaces in the overall Williamsburg market are comparable spaces in the overall Williamsburg market. We've offered a generous build-out allowance. Construction costs are significant expense for retailers. So we've offered free rent abatements. You know, we have weekly email solicitations, both on a national, regional, local level to prospective brokers, prospective retailers, corporate real estate representatives. We have regular meetings and calls with local, regional, national retailers, Williamsburg Economic Development. We go to national conferences 3 times a year. International Council of Shopping Centers is a large industry association. We go to their ICSC Las Vegas, Washington, and New York meetings. And then we also have the networking events locally, Strictly Business, twice a year that we attend. We've also got premium paid listings on LoopNet and CoStar, which aren't cheap. They're roughly about $15,000 a year. We've got advertisements, both print and radio, on with WI Daily. And then we've got a significant social media presence and online presence with our website, as well as our third-party property managers' websites as well. And we're doing regular postings, right? Events as tenants open, you know, trying to gain interest and show other retailers are coming to Midtown Row. And then, of course, we've got the memberships, commercial real estate broker events through IREM and other industry-wide events, and then incentivizing commercial brokers to bring us their deals, right? Giving them an extra half a point to a point on top of the commission we'd already pay to just gain interest. So it's pretty exhaustive. We've done a lot, but you know, it's a lot of retailers have told us they're focusing more on developing the Norfolk and Richmond markets before they infill to Williamsburg market. So.
And then second of 2 questions is just on that question around opaque translucent film, right, what people could see through
Sure.
the windows. There could be the allowance for the project with the stipulation to not hang Christmas lights or things that might more show that that's a residential parcel. But so I'm clear, maybe the tenants could be clear one day. Would Midtown Row then apply blinds so that you could make a fully opaque barrier between the pedestrian area of the street and the apartment itself? Or could they install blinds or curtains? What would keep it so that in the need for privacy, that space could be removed from just a line of sight standpoint from
Sure.
the pedestrian area?
So currently, all of the spaces are provided blinds. You know, obviously, it's incumbent upon the tenants or the residents to close their blinds. Right now, they're doing a pretty good job of it. You know, we do not want to see the same thing. We don't want to see Christmas lights or posters or, you know, even into restrooms or anything like that. The restrooms are separate rooms off of, can't see into the restrooms, thank goodness. But on the designs, just the way that the apartments are designed. So, but again, we want to maintain consistency, you know, in the appearance, and do not want any sort of things that are not approved, i.e. Christmas lights and those sort of things through. Whether it's a film that's with a mural, I think that's a great idea. That goes with the other 4 murals that we have at the properties. You know, we like being a partner with the City Arts Council with respect to the murals. It generates a lot of attention to the properties. Plus, you know, there's a message behind it, right? And the message is Williamsburg for a lot of the murals. So we'd like to remain consistent with that and, you know, enhance the buildings if there's an opportunity there.
Because I can see there being a point where commercially, some units are leased out, and the film as it's wrapped now goes away for most of Midtown, and I see your long-term vision of potentially putting something else in that space.
Yeah.
Okay, well, those are the questions I had. Thank you, Mr. Mays.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, Mr. Mays.
Thank you.
This is still a public hearing. If anybody else would like to come forward, state your name and address for the record, please. Welcome, Ms. Kaiser.
Thank you for responding to my email. Those who did, I appreciate it. I noticed that the one entity that was not approached about renting this space was the college. And that feels to me like a pretty sensible attempt, since these are all students, to put some college-affiliated resources in that space. That in itself could free up the dormitory that I understand is being converted to, I can't remember what you called it, department space, not commercial.
Academic,
What was it?
academic.
Academics. I also don't have a reassurance from reading information on the city website that any of this is going to have an impact on neighborhood balance. And there are so many of us that need that reassurance that the focus of the city as it goes into the next several years is to also maintain not just a facade of neighborhoods, but actual neighborhoods where families live and provide that kind of soul to a city. Without families, I don't think you should ever approach an independent school system. You can't do anything with several hundred children. You certainly could with several thousand. I also have this sense that, I don't know, maybe there's a poor building design if even free rent won't attract somebody to take that commercial space. It's in and of itself, like I said in my email, it is not a terrible idea to try to increase apartments or high density where students live. I just really worry that all problems start off as molehills. Otherwise, it would be called an emergency or catastrophe. So everything starts off small and grows. And without there being a real connected plan, I worry that the little bites that are being taken won't help those of us who live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser. Would anybody else like to come forward? Welcome, Ms. Fairbanks.
Good afternoon, Council. Sabrina Fairbanks, 119 Berkeley Lane. I'm also a property owner on Wythe Avenue in the Midtown area. Wanted to talk to you today about this proposal. While I do appreciate Council considering new proposals based on their own merits, I don't believe this is a new proposal. This project was approved some years ago, and there was some give and take by the developer then and the city. The city allowed this developer to add a fifth floor, and so that they could accommodate 240 apartments. And as a part of the give from the developer was that the entire first floor of every building was going to be commercial. And it's urban business, and it got approved. So now we come to them wanting to start to convert this commercial space. And at the Planning Commission meeting last month, I believe Tavia, Ms. Griffin said, that the staff did not approve it. I'm not sure what happened or why they're saying it's approved this month, but a few things that the Planning Commission did bring up that I think are important for you to consider. Ms. Liebel spoke about parking, and you don't hear the developer talking about they designed these buildings and the parking. So now to come and say, we don't have enough parking, so we would like you to convert this to something that is, more reasonable, doesn't, I don't think is accurate. They also, Ms. Liebel also talked about they're really probably already having insufficient parking, that she drove by Monticello Avenue, and all of the parking that's reserved for the businesses is full of tenants. And now they've got signage in the parking lot across the street, so that's overflow parking. If the tenants are using the street and walking across the street, which we know they don't like to walk far, then that already shows that there's insufficient parking for their current residents. Mr. Tarley spoke at Planning Commission and talked about his feeling that the developer had not shown due diligence in renting this commercial space. And he worried that it was going to take the commercial opportunities offline forever. And so looking into that after the Planning Commission meeting, there are some sites that average citizens can't get on. So I asked a friend to look for me, and he said that one site had not been updated, but another site, he showed a total of $38.77 per square foot for this commercial space, which apparently is very expensive. For instance, just down the street from this project, another owner has rented 3,000 square feet of business space, like currently, that their lease is going to start soon. They're known as being expensive. We've heard that the only more expensive place to rent in the city is Merchant Square. So to us citizens, it's not a big surprise as to why this hasn't been rented. They didn't accommodate parking, and the owner went so far at the PC meeting to say they never wanted to put retail in there, but they couldn't get approval unless they did. I thought that really took a lot of nerve to say that. And then last, I guess I would just say that the students have told us informally that Midtown Row is not affordable, which is, that's their desire, is to get some more affordable housing. And I would say that it's probably not the highest and best use of this space. I would admit that it's the most lucrative space for Broad Street Realty LLC. But and maybe the owner is right. This is a molehill request, not a mountain request. But if you start going down this road where commercial property owners can convert their spaces to residential, we're just going to have a city full of houses, apartments, townhouses, condos. We need our businesses, so please do not approve this request. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Cranbill.
David Cranbill, 201 Harrison. Well, I have to say thank goodness for Sabrina, who's done a whole lot of deep work. The notion that the rent was very high is an extremely compelling point. Second point is, Ruth pointed out, why didn't the college rent it? Because the college has rented property across the street for their grants and administration office. But I suspect they didn't come because the rent wouldn't fit in. So I'm rather worried, and it's too bad this didn't come up before the election, because it's not, in my mind, a good sign as to what's going on. And the discussion at the Planning Commission, which was Mr. Tarley's a very well-educated man on retail economics, and his comments seem to me to be rather compelling. But my major point is rather simple. I keep seeing retail space disappearing. I was rather upset to see what was Bob Singley's property, which was an excellent jewelry store selling lots of things, being taken over by the college. And I keep seeing more houses being taken over by the college. And I know on High Street, there's a proposal that I worked with months ago with Tevye on what to do with that building. And I wanted to see the whole first floor stay commercial. I'm not sure where that proposal is. But, I mean, and we're spending a whole lot of money in the city, a huge amount of money, actually. There are a lot of people worried about the debt that we're going to leave for our children and grandchildren. And the key to that is the balance of the revenue. And the revenue, a major portion of the revenue is retail stores. And I don't know if anybody's computed the ratio of retail stores to our population growth, but I think it's a shrinking ratio. And so we don't have any data on that I'm aware of. I mean, of course, maybe it is this, Andrew might have it somewhere in his staff, but I think we need to be very worried about the retail stores, their percentage and thriving. And so it really looks like this is a way to bail out a financial issue that this property's having, and I'm not interested in supporting it personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to come forward? Sir. Sure, please.
So I can tell you, your rent, we would love to get $38 a square foot. That's a really, really great rate for the city of Williamsburg. But that's not realistic. Realistic is probably $26 a square foot. And we've been offering that space at $20 a square foot. We've been offering that space at $18 a square foot. And that doesn't include the construction funds that we're willing to contribute. It doesn't include the free rent that is also included in that, right? So there's a lot of factors. I can appreciate your research, Sabrina, but there's a lot of factors, and $38 just isn't.
Mr. Mays, if you can just direct your comments to council, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Realistically, this is 8,000 square feet. Again, we have deployed every leasing and marketing strategy to get this space leased. It's 8,000 square feet out of a total of, right now, 63,000 square feet of retail. It's a tiny portion. But in order for us to activate and generate activity on that space, retailers just aren't interested. And as I mentioned previously, there is an oversupply of retail space in the overall Williamsburg submarket, right? It's a challenging market. It's tough to get retailers out of the cities to come to Williamsburg. And we've deployed every effort to try and do so. So, in terms of the shrinking retail, we've seen it, but we've got interest on the other buildings, but it's smaller spaces. It's local and boutique Main Street business owners that we'd love to have there. But it has been a challenge over the last 5 years. So again, I don't think that the impact of this is that great for 8,000 square feet on a retail, just the retail of 63,000 square feet. It's a very minimal ask that we're asking for here.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Any other comments? If you'd like, Ms. Kaiser, sure.
Not really just playing devil's advocate. I'm listening to the rebuttal and thinking, if small boutique retail space is what is desirable there, it would be a lot cheaper for the developer to just divide that huge space into smaller boutique-friendly areas and rent it. Again, I'm not saying as a standalone that adding rental space for students is a bad thing. I think it's necessary to try to, since somehow, I don't know whether it was active or passive, that the city is the party responsible for supplying several thousand off-campus student housing. I don't know where that came from, but that seems to be, to me, this underlying issue that there's no discourse on it. It's like it's said, it's done, and it's been filed, and now it's up to the city to provide thousands of student living space. If that area is the only suitable solution is to convert it from retail to student apartments, I guess I'm feeling what Sabrina was saying is, what happens to all the other unleased, unrented commercial space in the city? Do we then expect that becomes a conversion request, a special use permit, and it goes to a conversion to high density? It's kind of a back alley way of doing things. And I think that while we do need the housing, we also need to have retail. This is supposed to be a small town / city vibrant area where people live. And I just keep getting the feeling like, I've said it before, we're going to kill the goose that lays the golden egg, and we're going to have a place where there's so much transience in terms of who lives here and so much lack of support for the people that live here that you're going to actually have this self-fulfilling prophecy where people aren't going to come to live or shop. And then you're going to have to do things like build an $83 million sports complex to get people to come here. It's almost like making the next step be 5 problems that you can then spend the next several years solving, instead of digging down to the very root problem of why we have the issues we have in the city. And I mean, you know, this thing isn't going.
I've got it right here, though.
Oh.
And you're getting close.
I got a lot of time. And this is probably not the forum to try to uncover a lot of the complications that I think are involved in this one little molehill decision. I would like to suggest that City Council and the City Manager entertain the idea of having city residents and students come together and sit at a table, whether it's breaking bread or just taking notes together, and trying to figure out how we come to a concept of Williamsburg as it would be attractive to all parties. And I keep getting this feeling over and over again that those of us who actually live here are getting pushed farther and farther to the side. And
Thank you, Ms. Kaiser.
was that the 000?
That's
Okay.
zeros.
All right.
But I think you made your point, and I appreciate it. And I'll just say, we hope to begin the comprehensive plan process, which will be an opportunity for everybody to get together. So thank you, and I apologize for making comments, but thank you. All right, seeing no one else coming forward for the public hearing, I'll turn back to council for comments and considerations. I guess I'll kick it off. I was on city council when we approved this development, and I remember being one of the ones that, and obviously we all agreed, to really have first floor commercial throughout the shopping center. And I do remember that section being originally or conceived to be apartments. But as been pointed out, commercial business is absolutely important to the city, and I think the commercial zone property is around 7%, Tavia? Just say yes.
That sounds familiar. Before you finish talking, I can tell you.
Okay, so, it is a concern, and we have this conversation routinely. But not everything is the same everywhere. And so when I look at this piece of property, and particularly where these proposed apartments are going relative to retail availability, I can see, and I've been in the retail business for many years, maybe as long as anybody in this room, except maybe Mr. Shohan back here, maybe neck and neck. And seeing the economies come and go, up and down, visitation, I've worked on attracting customers for many years, and I can see that this little corner of Building 1 would be a challenge to get retailers to lease, and then because it's a challenge to get consumers to that part of the building. So, I'll take Mr. Mays at his word that they've made every effort to attract retailers there, whether they have a start price of $38. I'm sure that is, if it's seen on LoopNet, that's probably the price, but it's just the starting of a negotiation. So, I believe that it's been tried to be leased. In terms of highest best use, I do believe it's housing, and I don't think it's going to have a negative impact on the overall greater Williamsburg area, certainly not Williamsburg itself. I think it provides additional housing for students that want to live there, and I do think that works towards some of our neighborhood balance efforts. If we can lessen demands in some of our neighborhoods, maybe we can get those homes that are currently student occupied turned into non-student occupied, if that's the goal, and I think a lot of people feel it is. The impact on traffic, the impact on parking, the impact on our utilities is less by making this conversion happen. So I support this application. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So this process has been unique to me, at least since I've been on city council, only because even though Ms. Shelton clarified what the motion meant in the Planning Commission, that wasn't the sense that I got from the commissioners that they approved this project. In fact, I think the chair's remarks were, we didn't help city council very much. So I don't think the way the vote went that they felt like it was an approval, even though that's the correct assessment legally. And also, that Ms. Griffin changed her recommendation based on more information, and that's not being critical of her, but I put a lot of weight into me as a city council member. When she brings something to city council, I put a lot of weight into her expertise and her recommendation on what's good for the city and what she doesn't see as a good fit for the city. If the desire of council is to convert this to apartments, I still have a huge issue with the window tinting, the shades along Monticello Avenue, and I would want something more definitive before I supported converting to apartments. But what I'd really like to see is since it's been a little bit unique process, and I don't think Planning Commission thinks they approved this PCR, that it go back through the process with some more definitive answers. And although Mr. Mays, I get the idea with retail space and there's not the desire, I am concerned about converting retail space, but then when you talked about boutique shops, before Ms. Kaiser spoke, I also wondered what's the cost of investing in making that a smaller space instead of leasing the entire space? So I would suggest that we send it back through the process so that when it comes back to city council, we have more definitive answers.
Okay. So what I've noticed in the 2 years that I've been here, which is the least amount of time of everybody up here, is that every time we have a proposal of any sort to add any kind of housing anywhere, it generates a lot of really important questions about what we are doing in town to address a lot of the housing stress that we have. And, one thing that I've learned is whether we are addressing a big proposal, adding hundreds of apartments in another area of town, whether that be High Street or over here by the railroad tracks, or just something very small, like a few units here or there. We end up having kind of moments of soul searching, if you will, and questions about larger tensions, right, brought up between, the college and the city and the response and the stress on neighborhoods. We end up coming back to this. And I think that one thing that I've seen this council do and been glad to be a part of is in those conversations, we in fact have been incredibly mindful of making sure that even though we have such need for residential housing for residents in our community, we haven't done so to run roughshod over commercial property. And in fact, I think that's been big reasons why some of the bigger developments that have been proposed over the last few years did not pass, is because we want to make sure that we are not sacrificing long-term potential commercial uses to even satisfy what is in fact a great need for housing. So I do want us to sort of step back for a moment and be like, wait a minute, like what really have we done over the last few years? I think we've actually tried to hold a pretty good line. And I can't think of a time in the last 2 years where we have actually allowed existing built commercial space to be converted to a residence. So this is the first time, actually, we are confronted, at least again in my time in the last 2 years, on council with the actual question of should we convert this particular already standing built commercial space into apartments. Again, separate from a question of should we rezone something or should we change proportion for something that hasn't been built yet, and we actually voted those down. So I think then, we have these big questions and we will continue to address every proposal on its own merits. And I think that we have to realize that not every proposal and not every moment can do everything, right? That's impossible. And so we can't solve a problem. We can't solve a problem that is as multi-headed as our housing issues with any one potential or any one particular proposal. What we can do, right, is be thoughtful about what could be the long-term consequences of any particular decision that we make. And I think that we've done a pretty good job in the last few years of doing that. So all that being said, with this particular proposal and looking at this particular proposal on its merits, I'll go through my thinking, but then I will also explain why I actually don't think that this is something that is a slippery slope into something more concerning. From what I see, we have an apartment building that has always been apartments, all apartments, in an area that is designed to be mostly apartments, in fact, 240 of them. We have a proposal to add 5 apartments to that one building. We have data that shows that this use is less stressful, the residential use in this particular space would be less stressful to utilities and to traffic than if it was a commercial space. We have data, right? And again, I can't question, go back and use hearsay and question a lot of motives. I mean, I have to take what's before me on its face as to what has been tried in order to rent this space as commercial. And through this, right, and what I appreciate about what's in this report is that we have learned that there's particular characteristics about Building 1 that make this suitable for additional apartments, right? And we have also, very importantly, learned through this process what makes the other buildings not suitable for additional residential apartments. And in fact, if anybody want to know what I'm talking about pages 27 and 28 of the staff report. That spells out, okay, why 5 apartments here? What's going to stop us from doing 5 apartments over in that building, and 5 apartments over in that building, and 5 apartments over here? Well, the report actually tells us that there are reasons why, and now it's on the record, that additional residential space in those other buildings would not be suitable where it would be, particularly for Building 1. And then I also balance this, that we hear a lot about stress in our neighborhoods, and that's absolutely accurate. There's a huge amount of stress in our neighborhoods. And so when I look at this, and when I look at all of these things put together, and I can kind of separate the big questions that we have to wrestle with and we have to continue to wrestle with, and I think about how not every proposal, and there's no one magic bullet here, so what are we doing? And then I look at this proposal on its own merits, and I look at what it's got going for them, how it's not a slippery slope, and that's 17 less beds that we will have maybe stressed in our single-family residence. I think this really pulls it all together, and that is why I support this.
Ms. Ramsey?
Well, thank you for the presentation. Thanks for the questions, and I will try to pull together my thoughts in similar way. And one thing that would be helpful to me, Ms. Griffin, if you could show that picture. It has the overview of Midtown, where we've got Ace and Earth Fair on the right-hand side. I think it was near the end of your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
That one. Go back.
Yeah.
That one. So when I was out there the other day, one of the comments that have been made is that this doesn't provide real easy access to people wanting to shop, and that's been one of the concerns of people looking at this space is there's not good parking. And then I started thinking about, comments made in the Planning Commission meeting about activation of the space. And so when we sort of redid this whole area, it was very purposeful to have one stoplight and one entry into Midtown Road, because I think there used to be another exit from the parking lot further down. So our goal was to funnel things in and create a grid between College and whatever that other one is that goes along there. And so you'll see where sort of all of the activity that has been developed around there is absent Building 1. It sort of sits up there at the end with the only thing behind it, the parking lot. And if I'm correct, all of the access to the other retail spaces is off College Road.
That's correct.
So there's nothing to really draw people down to Building 1. There's no crosswalks to get across to it. And we often talk about retail, and one thing that I've observed and have had sort of answered by people in Midtown Road management is that contrary to what was thought, the students do not frequent as much as believe the retail places there. They tend to sleep there, and then they leave and go to campus or they go elsewhere. And I had an event at Midtown Row, and I was at the Fall Festival, and both of those two things, and I've been in Midtown Row, I've met with Ms. Warner on a few things, I've been to art exhibits out there. The students seem to come into the building, go directly to their rooms, they don't even tend to utilize the amenities as much as I thought. So depending on students to help keep those retail spaces going, I think hasn't been as high a use as was originally anticipated. The other thing is when this was all designed, it was pre-pandemic. And I think a lot of people's shopping habits have changed. Obviously, work habits have changed. People don't frequent some places as much as they used to. I would dare say that a majority of people in this room use online shopping where they used not to. And so saying, well, if we have it, retail will come, I think is a little, quote unquote, easier said than done. Even in very desirable spaces in Merchant Square, we've seen French Twist close up, the a place that Ms. Kaiser mentioned that used to be the Master Craftsman. They closed, they retired. There's another place that someone else has. The old campus shop is still available for rent. And so people's habits and needs, I think, we have to admit, have changed over time. I do think, in terms of what Vice Mayor Dent said, that something other than a light film needs to be applied to the windows. And he and I are both on the Public Art Council, and one of our desires over the past year is to expand public art with some temporary installations. And I think this would be an excellent project that could be pursued to put a little more life into those windows. And also a few tables and chairs, as you mentioned, could activate the space and give it a sense of place, more so than the light film. So my question is, can we include things like that in the motion that we would make, as far as, one, being able to, I don't know if we can require or to have them request something through the Public Art Council to have like art film or art cling or some to investigate that. And the other thing is could we include something that restricts conversion of residential just to this one building?
Looks like Ms. Shelton's going to answer your question.
So you can require the applicant to go back to the ARB. I would suggest that you also refer the matter back to the ARB as council for reconsideration of the film on the window. And your motion could be for the applicant to work with staff on a better privacy solution for those windows.
And as far as restricting conversion of residential, commercial to residential, limited that only to building one, can we?
Yes. Which is the only thing in front of you today.
Right, but such that there wouldn't be, like, well, I guess if any other request, it would also be
It would come
a
back to you
special
exactly the
use,
same
and
way.
at that point, we could deny that.
That's right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, a lot's been said, so I hesitate to add on to much. I think much is in agreement. What I'll try to do is pair, though, some of the different factions from what we might have heard of today into why, from my perspective, it makes sense, this project to go forward with. Generally speaking, it's two different reasons, and the most important one is actually, for me, not the arguments of Midtown Row and what I agree, I believe, to be a lot of concerted effort to find retail space, but instead that potential impact on neighborhood character. 17 different dwellers, students, young professionals who might live there, between 5 different apartments. If you take those students, you divide by 4 for 4-person houses, that's over 4 houses that there could be demand for in the neighborhood. But what we've done, and what the council before I got on council did, is create this unique area of the city that is higher density and mixed use, which is, as has been mentioned, such an interest to the younger population. There's a wait list of 360 residents because they see it as a good place to live. And absence of that, I think you have students really wanting a bikeable or a walkable location to college, to William & Mary, and that's going to be in some of our historic neighborhoods. So I really do come from a, first off, neighborhood balance perspective of wanting to not have too much pressure put on our historic neighborhoods, and I see this opportunity to add some housing, not always as the right solution, but in an area that's already mixed use, already higher density, as the right solution from that perspective. The second is that I was on council when I got to, with some other members here, sign the final beam and got to see Midtown Row then really take effect. And I know the recruitment effort started even before then to put retail space in it. I know that the pandemic has been a difficult time, and not having been a person in retail myself, maybe there is an interest in building out larger markets, but I believe that that effort has been made to try to make this space retail. And I would rather have something there to increase the vibrancy of the area, in an area which I think has really done well for our city versus what was there, the shopping center beforehand, versus nothing at all. As far as proposals different than what is proposed today, I think the opportunity in the future, should there ever be a request to move commercial to residential, a future council will have the opportunity to decide on then. I wouldn't want to have anything in the current proposal that restricts that council of the future, as I think from everything all five of us have said, there's really not, for that 7% of the city that is commercial, an interest in more and more eroding that, even if at the molehill size. We don't want that to become an emergency one day and just not having enough commercial space. And I would believe in Midtown Row, in whether it's the film of the location, or certainly the blinds that sound like they're already going to be up, also treat the space with care from a standpoint of the future residents that live there. I wouldn't want to live there if there was no ability to have an opaque line of sight between the pedestrian area and my apartment. And so I assume Midtown Row, in wanting to lease it out, would go to efforts to make sure that residences, that the people who ultimately live there, would feel safe in that space. So for those two reasons, chief for me being neighborhood balance, I see this being a good opportunity to, again, alleviate some of that natural demand. And as I wrote in a email earlier today, that natural ever-present investor creep in the neighborhoods by having additional housing already in an area that's high density for younger people for housing. And I also think Midtown Row would be best served by having this be residential. With that note, I'd be comfortable moving ahead with the proposal as defined. And I'm happy to make that motion unless there's further comments.
Well, thank you all for your comments. I think both Vice Mayor Dent and Councilwoman Ramsey had talked about some form of skin on the window. I was trying to watch the applicant, and I thought I saw a nod agreement. So I wonder if we couldn't make a motion to approve and have them go back to ARB seeking some sort of changes to the windows.
So if that's the case, is that approved here today and then brought to the ARB and back in front of council,
It would not come back in front of council.
contingent on ARB approval with council's approval and request of their ultimate approval, then it would be fine to move forward with?
If you move forward today to approve it, contingent on the ARB and the applicant coming to some arrangement about the windows that's different than what they planned, you can table it and have that happen, or you can approve it and it would not come back to city council. So the only way it would come back to city council is if you didn't approve it today,
Okay.
contingent on that.
I understand that. I don't have a total clear idea of what this alternative is, so I'd like to hear that first.
And having heard what Ms. Shelton says, I would hate for this to get hung up on an ARB decision or lack thereof. So I'm not comfortable with that.
Well, which is why I think you need to refer it back to the ARB with direction about what you want them to do.
Which would still be pending their approval.
A more opaque film on the windows as opposed to blinds, for example. So to reconsider the plan that they have now.
And Ms. Griffin, I think we talked about it, but ARB, did not want to see an opaque film on the window?
They did not want to see the same film that is on the residential, and it's a gray film that during the day you cannot see in, but at night you would be able to see shadow.
Rationale, just for consistency on the first
They
floor?
wanted consistency on the first floor with the commercial that are in the other buildings.
But it's not going to be commercial.
I agree with that.
And I think what you were saying is that as a resident, you would prefer having an opaque as opposed to basically a translucent.
My point actually was the opaqueness would come from the blinds, which would be installed in this location as
Only
have
if
the others.
closed.
Sorry.
Only if closed.
Right. So are we waiting? Yeah, Vice
Yeah, I
Mayor.
mean, again, my only concern with the blinds is who's gonna monitor that they're closed? But also, you're not talking about a residential size window. You're talking about a huge commercial window. And it's it's unappealing from the street side to see windows that big with a blind, and I would like to see ARB agree to something for me to be comfortable with it before we approved it. That's
Current Chair?
So my question is, would going forward today and doing this preclude in the future, like the Public Arts Council proposing to do something artistic on those windows?
No.
So they could do that in the future?
Yes.
Okay.
Why don't you take a shot at a motion?
Well, we can move to approve PCR 24-022 with the condition that the owner prohibit the application, pinning, or hanging of any items on the interior or exterior windows by the occupants in the 5 apartments on the first floor facing Monticello Avenue in Building 1, with the recommendation that the applicant work with Williamsburg Public Art Council to create a film on the windows that would be approved by ARB.
I have a procedural question there. Recommendation then is non-restrictive, so that's a
That would-
suggestion.
Yes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. McKay, would you call the roll?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
No.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, takes us now to reports, and first is the monthly financial statement. Director Dameron.
Good afternoon. You have in your packet the financial report, and I again wanted to focus on some of our revenue streams. I want to note two things. These slides are based on October year-to-date compared to previous Octobers, and the dollars are current dollars. And I think that once we wrap up our audit, I'd like to throw this into real dollars because I think it would be very interesting to do that comparison. And so on this slide, I'm showing first the room tax. And as of October, compared to October of 2023, we see a 1.8% increase. Compared to December of 23, we see a 4.9% decrease, and that equates to about $53,000. And then compared to fiscal year 2019, we have a 4.3% increase. In regards to our meals tax, comparing to October of 2023, we see a 5.4% increase. And compared to October of fiscal year 2019, we see a 26.2% increase in the meals tax. And then looking at their sales tax revenue, really we're pretty comparable to October of 23, just slightly below. And then compared to fiscal year 2019, we see a 23.8% increase. And then moving forward, looking at our $2 lodging tax, we see a 3.1% increase compared to October of 23. That equates to about $8,000. But compared to 2019, we see a 16.4% decrease, and that equates to about $53,000. And looking at our historic sales tax, comparing to October of 23, we see an 11.6% decrease, but compared to fiscal 2019, we see a 16.7% increase. And we talked about our annual slides. I don't have too many comments about this, just wanted to include it in the packet in case somebody else wanted to, or in case you wanted to take a review of that. I will comment that compared to 2019, the only revenue stream that we see with the decrease is our $2 lodging tax, and that decreased about 11.5% from 2019. And then comparing our revenues to the previous year, the only two that we really see an increase in are our meals and our local sales tax. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The full report is in your packet. Other things at this point are moving according to budget,
Good,
but
thank
I'd
you.
be happy to entertain any questions.
Questions?
No questions. Thank you again for the graphs. They're helpful.
Look forward to doing some more as we progress with our revenue streams further in the year.
No questions. Agree that the graphs are very helpful.
I have none. Thank you, Director Damon.
Thank you. Okay, monthly departmental operating reports. Mr. Trivett, who's in the barrel?
This month, we're going to hear from IT.
Right.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, members of council. Today, I drew the short straw, so I'm going to give you an update on everybody's favorite topic of cybersecurity. So first, as we get into this, I think the first thing to kind of level set some context, to give you an idea of what we look at on a monthly basis in terms of attacks, threats that we're blocking or prohibiting in some form or fashion. So we'll kind of set the stage with this. So first, Office 365 messages. This is email, OneDrive, Teams, predominantly over 90% is email though. So on average, a little over 1.3 million messages that flow through the city per month. About 1,000 of those are malicious. And by malicious, I mean there's some sort of payload, whether it's an attachment, a link, whatever the case may be, that if it were to be executed is going to do significant harm to the city. About 13,000 are spam. These are certainly not as bad or nefarious as the previous ones, but it's going to cause some sort of harm. Not bad, but it's something that we don't necessarily want to have within the confines of the network. And then lastly, about 31,000 of those messages are what we would call gray mail. And gray mail is something that's just more of an annoyance. It's ad blockers, things of that nature that get in there, make your PC run slow, all of that. Next bit of numbers is the firewall and what we're blocking per month based on what traffic coming into and out of the city via the firewall. The firewall sits between us, between the internet and the city networks. So it's kind of the gateway entry into the city. So 1.3 million websites, URLs, domains, if you will, are blocked. A lot of this is due to us blocking anything outside of the continental United States from entering. If you've traveled outside of the country, you're very well aware of that, and we've probably had conversations to allow you to communicate back while you're gone. But 2,400 critical severity blocks, these are items that the firewall categorizes as critical, and they're easily exploitable, meaning if they were to get through, hackers, nation-state actors, whoever could really get in and do some damage. Then the severity kind of goes down a little bit more after the critical. High, about 800. However, those are really critical in nature, but they're more, they're less hard, or they're more difficult to really do anything about. So there's not a lot of ways in which they can exploit that particular vulnerability. And then medium security blocks, 84,000, all the way down to low, about 206,000 events that come through every month. So that's the numbers. So what do we do to protect and secure the city? As I said earlier, we block all access to any internal access to a city network from outside the continental United States. We do this because primarily nation-state actors in other countries trying to get in and do us harm. In fact, if you look at the log for the firewall, the predominant amount of traffic that's just dropped as soon as it hits the firewall, what you would expect, China, Russia, North Korea, all of that, it's just immediately dropped. All inbound and outbound email is scanned for malicious activity. We're making sure that any email that comes in doesn't have any bad links in it, any payload attachments to it, that if they were to be executed on a city-owned computer, it could cause us or the city some harm. And then the next part is scanning of all internet traffic. Everything that comes into the city or out of the city is scanned, and we're scanning for the obvious things here, the viruses. We're making sure that any data coming in or going out doesn't contain social security numbers, doesn't contain bank account information. We're making sure that the spyware is eliminated. No file attachments, we talked about that specifically with email. We want to make sure that all those bad file attachments are kept out. Ransomware, that's the one thing that keeps folks like me up at night because that's the stuff that can really do some damage. And then known bad websites, domains, or URLs, the firewall maintains a list of what's bad based on all of their research, and then it blocks according to that list. We have a security operations center that's manned 24/7, 365. It's by a third party. It's our endpoint security protection vendor, Cybereason. Essentially, all the traffic into and out of the city is being monitored. You see this is akin to if you've ever watched any movie and you've got people sitting in the dark and all this stuff going on the screen and, crazy stuff. That's what they're doing. They're making sure that any anomaly that they see, we get alerted on it. They can take action. We can take action. The next one is probably, I'll say, second most important. It's very important, the immutability of backups, both stored on-site and off-site. And what I mean by immutable is every night we take a backup of every system we have. When the backup program writes the backup to whether it's on-site or off-site, as soon as it's completed, it can't be changed. That's the immutability part of that. In a ransomware event, the first thing that a threat actor is going to try to do is to somehow or another compromise your backups. The longer they can compromise your backups, the more likely it is that you're going to pay the ransom, because the first thing, if we were to get in a ransomware attack, we're going to get all the bad stuff out and then be able to rebuild. If we can't rebuild because our backups are bad, then we've got a whole different set of problems. So immutability is key for that. We have some internal threat hunting capabilities. If something bad were to happen internally, we can go in and isolate computers, figure out who's affected, all of that. We have a pretty robust vulnerability management program. Every week, every computer, every network, every device that's connected to those networks is scanned. Any vulnerability that's identified is categorized based on the criticality of that vulnerability, allows us to go in and then mitigate those vulnerabilities in a triaged form. And then lastly, and I said immutability of the backups is probably the most important. Employee training is the most important. We're in the middle of October's always Cybersecurity Month. It was reported that I probably should have been up here in October talking about this. I won't say by who. But at any rate, we are in the middle of our annual cybersecurity training. I know the employees to a person would stand up here and tell you how much they love to do that. But that's done annually, and that is the most critical point because they're the first line of defense. They're the ones that are clicking on the emails and clicking on the attachments and all of that. And then finally, we test them every month, and they love it, and they love to tell me that they passed, or why do I have to do more training because I failed one of your tests? So that's really cybersecurity in a nutshell for us for right now. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barham. Much of that is over my head, but I'm certainly glad that you're at the helm and making sure that we don't become a victim to somebody's threat. You hear about it every day, across the country and across the world about evil actors on the internet and what they're able to accomplish. And so I hope that we are doing all that we can to make sure that we protect our servers and all of our IT stuff, and particularly, and you've heard me ask a question all the time about our water treatment plant to make sure that nothing gets in there and does something to shut that down.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mark. So with the third-party vendor, is that what keeps us current?
Absolutely.
So they're totally up to date with
So every device.
every strategy they use to block all of these?
Absolutely. Every device that's connected to a city network runs their particular program, their antivirus, anti-malware, all of that. That gets updated constantly, and those devices are what communicates back to them, where they can see that traffic and understand what's good, what's not so good, and what do we need to shut down immediately.
So through technology over the years, I guess, in my simple mind, that's what's changed. Is before you were keeping the city system updated, and now you have somebody, a vendor that handles all of that.
Yes, I would say my department, but certainly not me.
Gotcha, thanks.
I don't have any questions, just thank you very much to you and your team, because it's not, I don't know what I don't know when it comes to, and I think many of us, may be in that same situation, so to know that you are and your team are constantly, on this is incredibly important, because like the mayor said, this is really where we're always sort of fighting a battle, whether we want to be or not, is to making sure that we are safe in this regard because of the damage that can be done. So I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for all you do and your team and everyone else. I think we just want it to work and to work well, and to know that when we go online that we'll be able to do what we want to do. And I guess there is no end to what the hackers, the criminals are going to try next to try to break in. You think back a number of years ago, and I guess it started with a few little phishing scams and this and that. Now it's sort of, no one knows where it's going to go, and constantly being aware. So it's just sort of scary, but appreciate everything you're doing.
To that end, sometimes I still get emails from something like mayordoug@gmail asking me
Yeah.
for an immediate Venmo.
No, that is me. No.
Yeah, Mark, thank you to you and your team, including the team that I know helps these council meetings run, always serving us well and keeping us online for the public to see. It's a total team of the IT department of 4, 5?
6 total now,
6 total now.
that includes GIS.
Yeah, with GIS, that's right. So a small team monitoring 1.3 million emails, 1,000 of which could take down our systems with the malicious content they have. So really important work that you all are doing there. The only question I had was, I know that for other city operations, we'll often have vendors that have access to some or all of our data or communications. So how is the safety ensured for companies or other governments that we're working with?
So anything that comes through the city in terms of technology, data, especially access, all flows through these same systems and through our department.
Well, feel good with you at the helm, so thanks for keeping us safe, to you and the team.
Thank you, Mr. Barham. Okay, city manager's report, Mr. Trivett.
Only one thing to report, Mayor. Over the last month, we've had conversations about holiday rates for parking downtown, and unequivocally you have supported that, and so we will work toward implementing that as consistent with what we've done in the past. So we'll offer a holiday rate in the garage beginning at Thanksgiving and running through the new year.
Yeah, I think that's something that residents and visitors enjoy, to be able to go down there without having to worry about parking fee, and hopefully it drives more business. Shelton, anything?
Nothing right now.
Takes us now to open forum. I do have one speaker's card, the Honorable Mickey Shohan. Just state your name and address for the record.
Boy, it's nice to be on this side of the podium. Mickey Chohan, 129 Berkeley Lane, also the co-owner of Second Street Bistro, located at 140 Second Street. And I remember back in the day where Mark Barham was the only one in the IT department, and there was only 3 emails, so it was easy back then. But Mayor and members of the City Council, thank you for the opportunity to address this chamber. And congratulations to those that are back up on council for another 4 more years, 4 more years. And also to Councilwoman-elect Williams. Thanks, Caleb Rogers, for your service as well. At any rate, I'll dig right in. Recently, I received, like many other citizens, my real estate tax bill and personal property a couple of weeks ago, bill in the mail, and that's due December 1st. I elected to pay my personal property tax of $2,034 by credit card, and there was a processing fee because I chose to do it online. It was 2.5%. The processing fee came out to about $50.85. That meant my new total was $2,084.34. Should I have to pay the 2.5% on my bill? We all have become aware that nowadays, in a cashless society, that's a pretty common thing to pass that on to others. So the cost of the payment would be my burden should I decide to pay the fee the way I did. And, it's appropriate that today we get a finance report because on there we talk about meal tax. And that kind of helps me frame the reason for me being in front of you today. You now know what is meal tax, but I want to share with you where it comes from. Since you know what the numbers are, meal tax is collected by the restaurants and held because it's the city's money that we turn in monthly. Basically, we're collecting tax for the city. Sounds pretty reasonable. The problem is the tax I collect was paid by customers with credit cards, meaning when I collect the city tax, I paid the 2.5% for the privilege of collecting the money that I then remit to the city. It's not my money. Should I have to pay for it? Is that fair? If a guest comes in and spends $100, meal tax is 5%. So that means that I would be collecting $105. So I lost $2.50 on the collection of doing business. But I also paid a portion of the city's tax by collecting and paying that credit card fee of 12 cents, 12 and a half cents. So why should I have to absorb that? So not every transaction in our restaurant is, 100% credit cards. It's really 85%, but for this illustration moving forward and kind of giving you this example, in Paradigm, let's say it's 80 cents or 80%. So in 2021, meal tax for our restaurant that we generated, we paid the city of Williamsburg $173,760. At 80% of the credit card fees, that would have reduced that down to $139,008 times 2.5%. That means we absorbed the restaurant that year $3,475. And that goes on in 22, same sort of analogy. We paid 2.5% on 80% of the credit cards, and that ended up being $3,700. And in 23, $3,700 again. So using the finance department's estimates that were just presented, and it said the estimates for 2024 for meal tax collected in the city of Williamsburg was $8,953,255. And again, using that 80% rule, that reduces down to credit card transactional fees of $7 million roughly. At 2.5%, that meant the restaurants gave up almost $180,000 worth of money that we absorbed to be able to remit the tax that we collected from our customers. Now, there's a whole other side issue. I'm not going to cloud it up, but I'm going to mention it, poll tax, because we have to pay to have the privilege to collect the tax, to send it into you guys, that we then also have to pay the 2.5%. So I think what I'm hoping to try to suggest is maybe the state of Virginia has a line item on their taxation form. It's called a dealer's discount. Dealer's discount is a discount that they use to somewhat offset some of these handling fees. Dealer discount and these taxes in Virginia date back to the 60s, and that was something they did in order to absorb the cost of actually tabulating and figuring out what those numbers are. But then that became more computerized, so that wasn't the need as much as now it's switched over all to credit cards. So but I'm suggesting maybe the city needs to create some sort of dealer discount program to offset the credit card fees. In March of 2025, we'll celebrate 40 years of being in business in the restaurant industry and doing that in the city of Williamsburg. And I know that I've seen a lot of changes throughout the years, but this is an opportunity to shift an outdated policy to a more relevant, business-friendly approach. It's the one thing to talk about being business-friendly and vibrant, but it's another thing to actually do something meaningful. And this is an opportunity with council getting a refresh. It's budget season. You're going to be looking at things and how to allocate what you're going to do. I really, really would suggest you look at this hard. And I'm not looking for a hobby or extracurricular activity, but I'd be happy to work with anybody on council or the city manager to help try to flesh out something that's reasonable and fair, but that shows that you're actually trying to do something meaningful for the business community. So anyhow, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you do. And please let me know if I can be of any assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come up during the open forum? Seeing none, we'll close the open forum and move on into the agenda. And no unfinished business takes us to new business. And first, I believe we have an appointment to boards and commissions. Mr. Vice Mayor?
So I move to appoint Ann Hunt to the Architectural Review Board.
Second?
Wait.
Sorry.
For a
Dramatic
four-year term
pause.
expiring December 31, 2028, and reappoint Keith Johnson to the Williamsburg Farmers Market Advisory Board for an unexpired term ending June 30, 2028.
Second?
Okay. Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Next is consideration and action regarding adoption of the 2024 Emergency Operation Plan. Chief Snyder, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pons, Vice Mayor Denton, City Council members. It may not be as exciting as cybersecurity, but we get to talk about the Emergency Operations Plan. Most of you guys are extremely familiar with that, and just for the audience, those who will be watching later, the Emergency Operation Plan for the city is really our playbook on how we're going to handle incidents that impact the city, whether short or long term. And by the Code of Virginia, which is up there on the slide, it dictates that we have to review our Emergency Operations Plan and update it every 4 years. Generally, we're coming to in front of council in March of the year. Obviously, we're in November, so we're a little bit behind getting to you guys. But the Emergency Operation Plan has been updated. We'll work from March of this year until March of 2028, and then we'll be back in front of you guys to get that updated. Historically, we've always used a third-party vendor to help us update the Emergency Operations Plan. Like most things with cost escalations, the bids that we received to help us with that were quite interesting and outrageous, so we decided to do it internally. And with that, we asked the Department of Emergency Management to review our Emergency Operations Plan and do a crosswalk, which would identify gaps in areas that we needed to kind of cover for the city. And so they did that. And so with that, we reviewed as departments, specifically department heads in our ET meeting, looking at some of the gaps that were identified by the Department of Emergency Management, and we talked through some of those things on what we needed to do to fulfill those gaps. Were they concerns now, or were these things that we wanted to kind of flush out over time? So it was a really great opportunity for us to do an internal review with partnering with the Department of Emergency Management to make sure that our Emergency Operations Plan was updated appropriately and was well positioned to support the city. Some of the things that were new this year, of course, is a new and evolving terminology, points of contact, reference charts, those things. With the new fire station, we obviously have a new EOC, so we had to update the EOC layout, which was exciting. Wendy Evans and her team, they memorialized our shelter feeding plan, which is something that we've been wanting to do, so credit goes to Wendy and her team. And the other thing that was of really good completion this time was an execution of some MOUs with Colonial Behavioral Health, which was also done by Wendy, and then WADA and our Williamsburg, James City County Schools MOUs. And for WADA, it's really for our transportation services in the event that we need transportation for either our special registry list or other transportation needs. Then our school systems is also about bus transportations, which really falls into the radiological plan, but it also opened up to utilizing schools to be assembly sites for different events in the event that we needed that. So it was a good opportunity for us to work with our partners to memorialize some of those agreements as we move forward should we need them. And of course, Ms. Shelton was a great help to get us completed with that. And really, that's an overview of the Emergency Operations Plan. I will say that talking to VDM, and as you guys well know, with Tropical Storm Helene's impact with Southwest Virginia and North Carolina, we do expect a lot of best practices to come out of the impact from those communities, particularly from debris management and other things that are going to impact us that we'll be able to learn from. So I'm sure over the next 4 years, even before 2028, we will try to incorporate some of those best practices into our emergency operations plan. And should also note that the emergency operations plan is broken up into different sections. It's got a basic plan which really outlines the basic functions of how we're going to operate, but there's also 12 different annexes that are very deeper dives for very specific functions, whether it's damage assessment, whether it's mass care, terrorism, and those types of things. So it was a really good opportunity for us to review our current documentation and our city's plans, and as we prepare for the next 4 years and continue to stay apprised of the emerging things that are happening within our communities to make sure that it continues to stay updated. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chief. I don't have any questions, but I certainly do appreciate the efforts that go into making sure that we all stay safe and being able to present this plan. Maybe the chief has some detailed questions, former chief.
No, it's obviously it's a necessary plan. Not the most exciting thing you do in the fire service, but it's definitely a plan that, as the chief mentioned, it outlines the details of how the city responds to any event. So I know it's a lot of work, so just appreciate all the work that went into it to get it up to date.
Sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Thank you. I have no questions either.
Thank you, Chief Snyder, for the detailed report. I have no questions either.
Great. Somebody like to make a motion?
So I move that City Council approve Resolution 24-21 to adopt the updated Emergency Operations Plan for the period of March 2024 through March 2028.
Second.
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, next is consideration action regarding the Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund for a common cause for all, for the applicant being Colonial Williamsburg. Ms. Matsumoto.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Pons and members of City Council, for allowing me some time on today's agenda to present an application from the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for a Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund grant. So a little bit of background on the program itself. It was adopted in 2015 with the intent of increasing overnight visitation to the city of Williamsburg by either providing startup funding to a new event, project, or activity, or providing funding for a new element of an existing project, activity, or program. It's important to note that this fund is not designed to provide year-over-year support for any kind of project or activity or event. Some past approved projects are listed on that slide. I won't read them to you, but City Council did allot $150,000 to this program for FY25, and no awards have been made as of yet. So Colonial Williamsburg has submitted an application requesting $50,000 to defray the costs associated with the Common Cause for All, which will be held March 24th to 26th of 2025. This is the third and final of 3 annual events bringing together museum professionals and planners for America's 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence from across the country to convene here in Williamsburg. The total event budget is $256,000, and it will take place at the Williamsburg Lodge. Attendance did increase from year 1 to year 2 by 39%, and is expected to increase again in 2025, attracting more than 400 individuals. Staff recommends approval of the grant application in the amount of $50,000, and we do have a representative here from Colonial Williamsburg that's available to answer any questions about the application.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. The work that Colonial Williamsburg is doing to draw attention to Williamsburg using the 250th celebration as a catalyst. I think we all believe that democracy started here in Williamsburg, and with that said, I think we need to continue to support efforts leading into 2026, recognizing that we try not to fund or refund projects that aren't self-sustaining. I think this is uniquely different for those reasons that I just said, and so I look forward to supporting this. Mr. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I do as well. I think it's a great use of the funds to support this application.
Agree. No questions.
Same for me, and I can attest to the fact of being at Common Cause, I guess, in 2023, and at my table, there was someone from Mississippi and Louisiana and from different parts of the country, so it definitely does bring in people from all across the country.
I agree. I've witnessed the same thing, so I'm excited to support this, see the growth of the event, and it also strikes me, too, that this fund was meant for those events which are temporary, and we're leading up to the 250th, so this is an important thing to promote now.
Maybe we'll just get started practicing for the 300th.
The 300th, yeah. It's a rare event, too. You can hear Thomas Jefferson speak, so it's nice, and I look forward to support.
Is there a motion?
So I move that City Council award $50,000 from the Tourism Promotion Contingency Fund to the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for offsetting the cost of a Common Cause for All.
Second?
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Item D is consideration and action of the proposed ordinance 24-14 to add section 10-14 to chapter 10, article 3 of the city code to establish a process to designate the Williamsburg Police Department as a person in charge of real estate, real property for purposes of trespassing on City of Williamsburg Redevelopment Housing Authority property. Michelle.
So this is me. So when someone is doing something inappropriate on city property or housing authority property, the typical process is that the city manager or the executive director would issue what's called a ban notice for that person so they can't come on city property except under certain circumstances for public business with an escort. But from time to time, there are circumstances where someone's doing something inappropriate on city or housing authority property in off hours, and that ban notice can't be issued that quickly, particularly with respect to the housing authority. And so it would be useful for the city and the housing authority to designate the police department as the person in charge for the purposes of issuing those notices, ordering the person to leave, and then if the person doesn't, they can be charged with trespass. Absent that designation, the police department is not a person in charge for purposes of the trespass statute. And so for that reason, we are suggesting adding this to the city code for the circumstances where something is happening when it shouldn't and staff is not available to issue those ban notices. The police department would have the authority to do that. Obviously, the city manager or the executive director could reconsider and rescind those notices upon appeal to them. And so this just closes a loophole right now for purposes of prosecuting someone under trespass when the police department is the one issuing the notices.
Thank you. So when you say police department, what does that mean?
Any
Is that the
police
patrolling
officer, a sworn law enforcement officer, whoever is responding to the situation where someone is engaged in inappropriate activity.
Yeah, having banned people from my properties, it's typically the person in charge of the property. And, but it's me and my real estate, it's just a single property. And so I'm usually more engaged. And so when we look at the housing authority in the city property, to try to find the city manager at a particular time, or even Mr. Franklin at a particular time, may be a challenge. But the police department is part of the city. And so I think that there's a familial aspect to that makes it more comfortable for me. So I think it's something I can support.
Yeah, and
Well said.
yeah. I think Ms. Shelton said it closes the loop where they have the authority to do what's necessary.
And I agree, but I think I just didn't hear you well when you said something about with the city manager still is the executive of
Right.
the organization. So what authority does the city manager's office retain in this
So the
situation?
city manager has control over city facilities, and he would have the ability at any point to issue a ban notice to anyone who's behaving inappropriately on city property. Now, there are some issues with that. We have to give people access to the building for paying taxes or accessing the bus system, and so we have a way of doing that. This just is a delegation of that authority to the police department, and in order to facilitate that, the city manager has to give the police department that written authorization. So when the prosecutors are going to court and charging someone with trespass and prosecuting that case, they actually need that piece of paper as evidence.
Okay, all right, thank you.
No questions for me.
I agree, this makes sense.
So I move I move that City Council adopt proposed ordinance 24-14.
Is there a second?
Second?
Dusty?
Mayor Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, next is consideration and action regarding the bid for the FY '25 street resurfacing and restriping for the city of Williamsburg. Mr. Reed, welcome.
Sir. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of City Council. City staff prepared a bid package to resurface specific streets within the city and restripe all crosswalks and stop bars on city streets and crosswalks on the campus of William and Mary. The restriping work also includes refreshing of lines and symbols at the city's Waller Mill Park, parking lot, and specific areas in the city that are in need of refreshing. All of the new and restriped markings will be upgraded to the heat-applied thermoplastic material, which will improve safety, improved reflectivity, and a slightly raised surface. The city streets that will be resurfaced are Mill Neck Road, Berkeley Lane, Governor's Drive, Governor's Court, and essentially the loop around the new fire station, the Armistead, the city block between the Transportation Center and Lafayette, north boundary in front of the post office, and then all of the Transportation Center area there. The low bidder was Branscombe Incorporated. Their bid was $874,177. Included in this is $16,000 to do the college crosswalks, and that will be covered by the college. The college asked us to add that as a change order essentially to this, but they'll be covering the cost for that. The bidder is well qualified to perform the work and has performed similar work for the city multiple times in the past. The work is projected to begin this month, but will likely not be completed until May of 2025. Both the restriping and resurfacing is weather dependent and temperature dependent, so as it gets colder, we'll have to pause the project until the warmer months in the spring, but we anticipate finishing everything by spring of 2025. And we ask the council award the bid and authorize the city manager to execute the FY25 street and resurfacing contract for the city of Williamsburg to Branscombe Inc. For $874,177.95.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Yeah, I appreciate the work that goes into planning and just keeping an eye on the conditions of our roadways and just our quick response to getting things done. I'm looking forward to the thermoplasty, highly reflective material going down. I think it's going to make a difference in terms of pedestrian safety, so I think that's a good thing. I see on there that it says milling asphalt overlay. So we're going to obviously mill all the streets so that we don't have that lip that overhangs the curb and gutter and causes problems. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor.
That was going to be my question, is all 3.22 lane miles have the milling done?
Yes, sir.
Awesome, thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad to see this come to where it is now for us to pass it and get started. So you mentioned, I know we've been waiting particularly for the crosswalks to be redone and looking forward to the thermoplastic. So what temperature is required for that to be done and for how long a period? Like for 1 day, 3 days?
It's 50 degrees and rising, and that's the asphalt itself. So even if it's a little cooler outside, if the sun has heated the asphalt enough to where it's 50 and say it's 9 in the morning and we know it's going to continue to get warmer through the day, we can go to work. I would say all of the paving will likely be in the spring, and we're going to do as much of the striping as we can now this month.
Okay, because that was my getting around to my question is that, the majority of the crosswalks, got a lot of them on Jamestown Road and Richmond Road, which are not included in the paving, and obviously all on campus. So you'll try and do them as much as you can right now.
Yes, ma'am. The plan is to start on campus, essentially work our way out
Okay.
from downtown, and then work our way out to the rest of the city.
And I noticed that Branscombe was really the only response to the advertisement. We've had this the past few years, I think, that the number of paving contractors has diminished that serve the city. Is there any way to compare their bid to when we had more competitive bids to see if we're still in sort of the ballpark of what we'd expect or want to pay?
We could compare, I guess, essentially what VDOT is paying, but as everyone knows, the cost of all of this has gone up, and there's just a lot of work out there right now. VDOT is bidding a lot of things, and these paving contractors are just spread a little thin, and so there's not as many groups to go around because there's just so much work being done.
So we pretty much have to take what we can get to get it done, I guess, at this point.
So many ways. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
But I think the good thing here is we know Branscombe and
Right,
they're
right.
a known
They've
contractor.
done work here before. I was just curious with, only having one bid this time of, on the price point. So,
I had a question too on the price point, Director Reed. I'm glad that was addressed. My second one, though, was particular to the Mill Neck Road area. Some of their roadways are different than the Richmond Road, Jamestown, right? Very black asphalt that you'd expect to see. So can you walk us through how Branscombe would plan to maintain that sort of, it's not cobblestone, right, but it's small pebble. There's probably a term for it that I don't know, but I know that's important to that neighborhood.
It's called surface treated, and unfortunately, we're not going to be able to pave it back like it is currently. It's a type of paving that many contractors just simply don't know how to do anymore. And when we go back to repave those areas, it will look like the rest of our streets. It won't have that same look anymore.
Okay, I know it's been aesthetically appreciated. I do notice, though, living around that area, that surface street style is much easier to have potholes and to diminish in color and to, it seems like, just go with the way of degradation over time. So I'm sure Branscombe will do good work. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion?
So I move to award the bid and authorize the city manager to execute the FY25 street resurfacing, restriping for the city of Williamsburg contract to Branscombe, Inc. for $874,177.95 based on unit prices.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, before Mr. Reed sits down, let's talk about consideration and action regarding bids for Capitol Landing Road outfall stream restoration.
Yes, sir. This stream restoration project addresses approximately 630 linear feet of degraded stream system next to Capitol Landing Road. The stream channel has been negatively altered due to stormwater runoff and from impervious surfaces within the drainage area. The stream bed and banks are severely eroded. The project seeks to restore the degraded system utilizing natural channel design to provide a stable drainage way that prevents future erosion and bank failure, as well as provide a productive habitat for wildlife. City staff prepared funding applications for DEQ, Stormwater Local Assistance Fund, and VDOT revenue sharing to request funding for the project. The city was able to acquire funding from both sources totaling $473,362, which only required matching funds from the city for $61,612 to reach a budget of $534,975. The initial low bid actually exceeded the budget, so we were able to go back and negotiate a lower price to make sure that the project fell within budget. The low bidder is Finish Line Environmental. Although they have not previously worked for the city, they have completed similar work within the state and are qualified to perform the work on this project. Staff recommends award in the amount of $515,832.50, which is the additional dollars over the 2019 budget. The excess that we are short is we will cover from a carryover from the Francis Street project. This work will begin as soon as possible with completion within 210 calendar days. We recommend the council award the bid and authorize the city manager to execute the Capitol Landing Road outfall and stream restoration contract with Finish Line Environmental for $515,832.50.
Again, thank you, Mr. Reed. You know, when you look at the pictures, you can definitely tell this is work that needs to be done, and certainly applaud our efforts of acquiring some sources of funding for over $473,000, which makes this a really good deal. So, thank you for that.
Yeah, no questions. Just thank you for, searching for the funds to make this possible.
Completely agree. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and I think this brings to an example what we've been talking about is that when we budget for improvements, whether it be infrastructure, roads, pavings, whatever, and then have to wait for federal or state funds to catch up, we've got a big lag. And so it looks like we started on this in 2019, and here it is 5 years later, trying to do the same work with that amount of money. So applaud you all for getting the negotiations so that we could get this done now.
Glad it's finally here. Thank you.
So I move that City Council award the bid and authorize the city manager to execute the Capitol Landing Road outfall and stream restoration contract with Finish Line Environmental for $515,832.50 based on unit prices.
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, takes us now to consideration and action regarding the 2025-26 Goals, Initiative, and Outcomes. Mr. Trivett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to go through this whole presentation again like I did on Monday, but I did want to skip ahead and point one thing out that was changed based on your comments. So on this, the One Williamsburg goal area under neighborhood balance implementation, we just reordered the top one. We took what was at the bottom and added it to the beginning at the request of Ms. Ramsey. So now we think that the importance is placed where it should be there. And that's really the only change that's been made since you all reviewed these on Monday. So I'll just skip ahead now to the timeline. So pardon the whiplash as we go through all this material. There we go. So again, this process really begins in June and with the National Community Survey. Then we move into the future festivals in September. And then in September, we have the GIO Public Input Survey that goes out at the same time. And then in October, we have the council retreat where we really take all of that information plus all of the information that's produced by the city during the 2-year period, all the things that we were able to accomplish from the previous GIO set, where we are with current plans, studies, and recommendations. And we take all of that and allow you then to construct what you think the priorities should be for the next 2 years. And they're really just sort of broad categories of action, but the conversation that you have during those 2 days is what we then take as a staff to try and write the GIO statements. What we do between then and November is we circulate the drafts of those and take your feedback on what should be changed, paying particular attention to the action verbs and the deadlines for finishing. And that is what we're presenting today. So we've had our first look at that completed version reflecting your input over the last month at Monday's work session, and now hopefully today you'll adopt it, and we will do the formal presentation of the adopted GIOs as a part of the State of the City at the December meeting.
Well, thank you, Mr. Trivett. As highlighted there on that timeline, this is a process that started in June of '24, and so we have done national surveys, we've done local surveys, we've done future festivals, and I think we've collected over 1,000 different inputs from our residents. And so, and I know we had 2 days of retreat, and we had some public input, and certainly we had the presentation Monday, where I don't believe we got any feedback from it, but this is a process that was deliberate and intentional, and I think we we certainly made every effort to make sure that our public was engaged and participatory in this. And at its conclusion here, I think we've got a good document, a good plan of action for the next 2 years. And so I want to applaud Mr. Trivett and all of staff. I know, I look over, I see Nicole, she's been working on this feverishly for a long time, and certainly as we've been preparing the state of the city or address for December, I'm really excited to be able to show this to the community. So thank you. Anything else, Mr. Vice Mayor?
No, I agree, and recognizing that there's already been a lot of work that's gone into this to get us to this point, from staff, the 2-day retreat, I know is a tremendous amount of work, but really now when we adopt it is when the work really begins, is working towards accomplishing what we feel is important for the city for the next 2 years. So I'm excited as well that we're ready to move forward.
Yes, I don't have a lot to add to what's been said. Thanks to everyone, to the staff, in getting us to this point. And I think also I want to recognize that I think as a council, we work well together and think through these things in a very collaborative way. And I think this process works so well because everybody really does move forward with such good intent and with the desire and an excitement to do what's best for our city. So I think, now the work does begin, but I think it's a remarkable starting place that really does reflect so much good energy coming from the community and from those in this room. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
And I too am glad that I will continue to be a part of it. And having been through a few GIO cycles, it's really nice to see how some things, continue and we work on getting funding, and then how many of them we complete and check off and go to new things. So it's nice to keep moving the city forward in such a positive direction.
I think I'm most excited to share it with the public. So being back here in a month is going to be especially fun for State of the City. I think this particular GIO set is extremely exciting for us. It is the one that leads us into the 250th. Yep. So it'll be a fun one to get to share for all that we're doing to prepare for that and better the city in other ways.
Thank you for those comments. Ms. Ramsey, I think it's something as I think back to the number of GIOs that I've been through, and I just want to compliment our city staff for going over and above to get us to this point. And I look back, not that our city staff didn't work hard, but the amount of work that they've done to engage our citizens in a way that has brought us good feedback is much different today than it was in 2010. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think Duncan, and even I can remember my first year with the whiteboards and the little stickies, and we might have had 8 to 10 people come through and put the little Post-it notes.
On the decision trees.
So,
Is there a motion to approve?
So I move that the City Council adopt the 2025-2026 goals, initiatives, and outcomes as drafted.
Second.
Okay, would you call the roll?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, I believe we have the matter for closed session, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Have a few of them.
Okay.
I move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one personnel matter per subparagraph 1 concerning appointments to boards and commissions, one legal matter per subparagraph 8 for the purpose of consultation on specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel concerning a possible amendment to the state code, and discussion of the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds, and discussion of the terms or scope of such contract where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body per subparagraph 29 regarding schools.
Second. Mouthful.
Okay.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
Okay, so we will step off into closed session, but we'll return to certify the closed session and adjourn the meeting.
I move to approve the certification of a closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia.
Second?
Ms. McKay?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
I move that this meeting be adjourned.
Second.
Dusty?
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mayor Pons?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Dent?
Aye.
Ms. Kernscher?
Aye.
You're adjourned.